I never thought I'd be sitting here, telling strangers about how my own family treated me like I was nothing. But sometimes life gives you stories that need to be told, even when they hurt. My name is Eleanor, and I'm 72 years old. My husband passed away 5 years ago, leaving me with our house, his pension, and too many quiet evenings alone. We have one son, Michael. He was always my pride and joy, smart, handsome, and kind-hearted. At least that's who he was before he married Vanessa. Vanessa came into our lives like a whirlwind 8 years ago. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. Long blonde hair, perfect makeup, always dressed like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Michael fell hard and fast. Within 6 months they were engaged, and I tried my best to welcome her into our family. God knows I tried. At first things were fine. She was polite enough when Michael was around. But I started noticing little things. The way her smile never reached her eyes when she looked at me. How she'd subtly change the subject whenever I spoke. The slight roll of her eyes when I showed them old family photos. Last month, Michael insisted I join them for dinner at this fancy new restaurant downtown. "Mom, you need to get out more," he said. I spent hours getting ready. I put on my nicest dress, a blue floral one I'd splurged on years ago for my retirement party. I even had my hair done at the salon. I wanted to look nice for my son. When I arrived at the restaurant, I could see Vanessa's face drop the moment she spotted me. Michael got up to hug me, but she just stayed seated, those perfectly manicured nails tapping against her wine glass. "Eleanor," she said, not even bothering to call me Mom after all these years. That's certainly a bold choice for dinner. I smoothed down my dress, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "It's my favorite," I said. "Your father always loved me in blue." She let out this little laugh, then leaned over to Michael. "Honey, we really need to take your mother shopping sometime. These old lady patterns went out of style in the 80s. The way she said it, like I wasn't even there, like I was some charity case. My cheeks burned with embarrassment. Michael just chuckled and changed the subject, not even bothering to defend me. Throughout dinner, she kept making these little comments. "Eleanor, you should check out those fashion blogs I sent you." And, "Don't you think your mom would look better in something more age-appropriate, Michael?" Each word felt like a little needle poking at my heart. I sat there, pushing food around my plate, feeling smaller and smaller. Michael barely noticed, too busy hanging on Vanessa's every word, laughing at her jokes, touching her hand across the table. I excused myself early, claiming I was tired. Neither of them seemed particularly disappointed to see me go. As I drove home alone, tears blurred my vision. Not because of Vanessa's cruel words, but because my son had sat there and let it happen. The little boy I'd raised to be kind had become a stranger who couldn't even stand up for his own mother. What Vanessa didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that my old lady clothes had a story of their own. A story I'd kept quiet for decades. A story that was about to turn Vanessa's smug little world upside down. The truth is, before I met my late husband Robert, I was something of a name in the fashion world. Not a superstar designer, mind you, but I had my own small label called LEB back in the 70s and early 80s. My specialty was timeless, feminine pieces with distinctive floral prints. I designed everything myself, from sketch to final stitch. For almost 15 years, my boutiques thrived in Chicago and New York. I gave it all up when I fell pregnant with Michael. Robert and I decided one of us should be home full-time, and I chose family over fashion without a second thought. I sold the business to a larger company, which eventually became part of the conglomerate that now owns dozens of luxury brands. I never regretted my choice, not for one moment. I never told Michael much about my career before he was born. It just didn't seem important. When he was little, he knew Mommy used to make pretty dresses, but that was it. As he grew older, I became just Mom, the woman who packed his lunches and cheered at his baseball games. My design days faded into the background, becoming little more than old photos in albums he rarely looked through. The morning after that humiliating dinner, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, still stinging from Vanessa's comments. On impulse, I pulled out the old cedar chest from my closet. Inside were my portfolios, press clippings, and a few preserved pieces from my final collection, the one fashion critics had called my masterwork. I ran my fingers over the fabric of a blue floral wrap dress, remarkably similar to the one Vanessa had mocked. The pattern was mine, hand-drawn and distinctive. I'd always had a knack for creating florals that were bold yet sophisticated, never cutesy or dated. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was my old friend Judith, one of the few people who knew my full history. "Turn on Channel 7, she said, her voice excited. "Now, Eleanor!" I fumbled with the remote, confused by her urgency. And there it was, a segment about the revival of vintage fashion brands. The reporter was standing outside a gleaming storefront with a familiar logo, LEB. "The fashion world is buzzing about tomorrow's relaunch of LEB," the reporter said. "The iconic 70s label has been reimagined for today's market, with prices starting at $500 for ready-to-wear pieces. Industry insiders are calling it this year's most anticipated comeback." I sat there, stunned. Yes, I'd heard rumors about a possible revival, but nothing concrete. The company that bought my brand had kept it dormant for decades. Now suddenly, they were bringing it back, using my original designs, my name, my legacy. The camera panned to show models wearing modernized versions of my work. There was my signature wrap dress, my distinctive collar design, my unique way of color blocking. They'd updated the fabrics and tweaked the silhouettes, but any fashion insider would recognize these as LEB originals. The mysterious founder, known only as LEB, has never been publicly identified, the reporter continued. She reportedly sold the brand and vanished from the fashion world, adding to the mystique that makes these vintage pieces so collectible. I sank back in my chair, a strange mix of emotions washing over me. Pride at seeing my work celebrated again, melancholy for the career I'd willingly set aside, and I must admit, a flash of vindication when I thought of Vanessa's sneering comments about my old lady patterns. If only she knew who she'd been mocking. That evening, my doorbell rang. It was Michael, looking uncomfortable. "Mom, can I come in?" "I need to talk to you about something." I let Michael in, noticing how he couldn't quite meet my eyes. He followed me to the living room, where my old portfolios were still spread across the coffee table. He glanced at them but didn't seem to register what they were. "Coffee?" I asked, already heading to the kitchen. "No, Mom, I'm good." He sat down, fidgeting with his wedding ring. "Look, I wanted to apologize about last night. Vanessa, she sometimes doesn't think before she speaks." I set my mug down carefully. 8 years isn't sometimes, Michael. It's a pattern. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, just like his father used to do when stressed. "I know she can be harsh, but she means well. She just thinks you could update your style a bit." "I see." I took a slow sip of my coffee, considering whether this was the moment to tell him everything. Before I could decide, he continued. "Actually, there's something else. Vanessa's been offered this amazing opportunity. There's this fashion brand having a big relaunch tomorrow, LEB or something. Apparently it's a really big deal." My heart skipped a beat. "Oh?" "Yeah, they're looking for influencers to promote the brand on social media." Vanessa got invited to the VIP preview event. She's ecstatic, says these clothes usually go to much bigger names. He smiled, pride evident in his voice. "They're giving her several outfits to keep. Isn't that great?" The irony was almost too much. "That's quite something." "The weird thing is," Michael continued, oblivious, She showed me some photos of the collection, and honestly, Mom, the styles reminded me of you. All those floral patterns she was criticizing? This brand has similar ones, but they're charging hundreds of dollars for them. I couldn't help myself. Fashion is cyclical, dear. Today's outdated is tomorrow's vintage treasure. He nodded absently. Anyway, I just wanted to say sorry about dinner. Vanessa's just excited about her career taking off. He finally looked at my coffee table. What's all this? Just some old memories, I said, closing one of the portfolios. Not yet. The timing wasn't right. Michael left shortly after, promising we'd have a proper family dinner soon. I stood at the window, watching him drive away, wondering when my son had become someone who would apologize for his wife's behavior without actually expecting her to change. That night, I couldn't sleep. I dug deeper into my closet, pulling out the box containing my most precious keepsake, my original sketchbook from my final collection. Inside were the hand-drawn designs that had defined the LEB aesthetic, along with fabric swatches and notes in my looping handwriting. Also tucked inside was the contract I'd signed when selling the brand. I'd been young and naive, but not stupid. I'd insisted on a clause that would give me credit and compensation if they ever revived the line, a clause they were clearly ignoring. By morning, I'd made a decision. I called Judith, who'd been my business partner back in the day. I want to go to that launch event, I told her. Eleanor, are you sure? Concern colored her voice. It's been 40 years. I'm sure. My voice was steadier than it had been in months. It's time the world met the real LEB, and it's time my family knew who I really am. What I didn't tell Judith was that, according to Michael, Vanessa would be there too, wearing my designs while thinking they were nothing like my old lady clothes. Sometimes life gives you a perfect moment for the truth. This would be mine. The morning of the launch event, I stood in front of my closet, hands trembling slightly. What does one wear to reclaim a life left behind decades ago? I pushed aside the everyday cardigans and comfortable slacks, reaching for the back where I kept a few special pieces. There it was, the original LEB signature dress from my final collection. Not a reproduction or an inspired piece, but the very prototype I'd sewn with my own hands. A deep navy blue with my distinctive hand-painted floral pattern flowing across the silk. I'd preserved it carefully all these years, wrapped in acid-free tissue paper. It was vintage now, but the cut was timeless, exactly as I'd designed it to be. Judith arrived at noon to help me prepare. She gasped when she saw the dress laid out on my bed. You still have it. The centerpiece from the '83 collection. Her eyes filled with tears. Eleanor, you're going to cause quite a stir. That's the idea. I smiled, feeling a strange calm settle over me. We spent the afternoon like we used to before big fashion shows. Judith helped with my hair and makeup, keeping it elegant but understated. I wanted to look like myself, not trying to recapture youth, but showing the world that LEB had grown and evolved, just as her designs were meant to. Have you decided what you'll say? To Vanessa, I mean, Judith asked as she fastened my pearl earrings, a gift from Robert on our 30th anniversary. I'm not entirely sure, I admitted. Part of me wants to see her face when she realizes. Another part just wants recognition for my work. The event was being held at the city's most prestigious hotel. As our taxi pulled up, I saw the banner spanning the entrance. LEB, the legendary return. My own stylized signature logo, the one I'd sketched on a napkin in a cafe all those years ago, illuminated above the door. Ready? Judith squeezed my hand, as I'll ever be. Walking through those doors felt like stepping through time. The exhibition space was filled with my designs, some original vintage pieces in glass cases, others new interpretations on mannequins. Large photos of my early runway shows decorated the walls, though none showed my face clearly. Fashion had always been about the clothes for me, not personal fame. People mingled with champagne flutes, industry insiders, and social media personalities alike. No one gave me a second glance, just another well-dressed older woman at a fashion event. Then I spotted her. Vanessa stood in a circle of young women, gesturing animatedly, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. She was wearing one of my designs, the signature wrap dress in a bold blue floral print, nearly identical to the one I'd been mocked for wearing at dinner. The irony wasn't lost on me. I moved closer, just within earshot. I was personally selected to represent the brand, she was saying. They said my aesthetic perfectly matched their vision. I've always had an eye for timeless elegance. One of her friends nodded enthusiastically. That pattern is gorgeous, so vintage but modern at the same time. Nothing like those old lady clothes my mother-in-law wears, Vanessa laughed. Though I guess even broken clocks are right twice a day. She actually had on something similar last week. Can you imagine? The group laughed, and something inside me snapped. Not in anger, but in certainty. I straightened my shoulders and walked directly toward her circle, my original LEB dress swishing softly around my legs. One of the event coordinators noticed me then, doing a double-take at my dress. I saw recognition dawn in her eyes as she looked between me and the archival photos on the wall. She hurried over, clipboard in hand. "Excuse me," she said, studying my face. "But are you—" Before I could answer, Vanessa turned around. Vanessa's face went from annoyed at being interrupted to shocked recognition when she saw me. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. "Eleanor, what are you doing here?" she finally managed, her voice tight. Her eyes darted around, clearly embarrassed that her dowdy mother-in-law had appeared at this exclusive event. Before I could answer, the event coordinator looked between me and the archival photos on the wall again. "Oh my God," she whispered. Then louder, "It's you, isn't it? You're LEB." The conversation around us immediately hushed. Heads turned our way. "I don't understand," Vanessa said, looking between us with growing confusion. I took a deep breath. "Yes, I'm Eleanor Blackwell. Before I was Eleanor Porter, I was LEB." The coordinator's eyes widened. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice ringing through the now quiet room, "we have an unexpected honor tonight. The original designer and founder of LEB is here with us." A murmur swept through the crowd. Phones came out, flashing as people took pictures. A man with a press badge rushed over. "Ms. Blackwell, the industry has wondered about you for decades. Where have you been? Why did you disappear from fashion?" I smiled, feeling strangely calm amid the growing commotion. I chose family. I had a son, and I wanted to be there for every moment. Vanessa stood frozen, the same blue floral pattern that she had mocked on my dress now wrapping around her own body. The color had drained from her face. That's impossible," she stammered. "You're a housewife. You've always been just a housewife." The word "just" hung in the air between us. All those years of small dismissals and belittling comments crystallized in that single word. "I was never just anything, Vanessa," I said quietly, for her ears only. "None of us are." The event organizers quickly ushered me toward a small platform at the front of the room. Someone handed me a microphone. Looking out at the sea of faces, industry, people who had been profiting from my designs without acknowledging their creator, I felt 40 years of silence finally breaking. "I never expected to be standing here tonight," I began. "When I sold this brand to focus on raising my son, I thought I was closing that chapter of my life. But seeing these designs brought back to life." My voice caught with emotion. As I spoke briefly about my journey and the inspirations behind the original collections, I watched Vanessa edge toward the exit. still wearing my design, still carrying my branded gift bag. But she couldn't escape the whispers that followed her, people suddenly realizing who she was in relation to me. I finished my impromptu speech to enthusiastic applause. Immediately I was surrounded by fashion journalists, photographers, and executives from the company that now owned my brand, all suddenly very concerned about whether I had been properly compensated for the revival. About 20 minutes into this whirlwind, I felt a gentle hand on my arm. I turned to find Michael standing there, his face a complex mixture of confusion, pride, and something like grief. "Mom?" His voice cracked slightly. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" The question hit harder than all of Vanessa's cutting remarks ever had. How do you explain to your child that you'd willingly let a part of yourself disappear, that you'd thought it didn't matter anymore? I reached for his hand. "There's so much I should have shared with you, sweetheart." Behind him, I saw Vanessa watching us, her expression unreadable. The perfect family image she'd carefully cultivated had just been completely upended. The mother-in-law she'd dismissed as irrelevant was suddenly the star of the very world she so desperately wanted to be part of. For the first time since I'd known her, Vanessa looked at me with something new in her eyes, not respect exactly, but recognition. She was finally seeing me. That night changed everything and nothing at the same time. The fashion world welcomed me back with open arms. Interviews, documentary offers, consulting positions. The company that owned my brand suddenly remembered that forgotten clause in our contract and offered a generous settlement. But none of that mattered as much as what happened with my family. Michael and I sat in my living room until dawn the next day, looking through my old portfolios and press clippings. He asked questions about his father's role in my business. Robert had been my biggest supporter. About why I'd given it all up. I never regretted choosing him. About why I'd kept it secret for so long. Some things just become habits. "I remember this," he said suddenly, pointing to a photo of a tiny workshop with fabric swatches pinned to the walls. "I thought it was just some room in our old apartment. I didn't realize. Mom, this was your studio." "You were only 4 when I sold the business," I said gently. "By the time you were making memories, I was already just your mother." He looked up at me, eyes shining. "You were never just anything, Mom." Hearing my own words to Vanessa echoed back to me by my son broke something open inside me. We both cried then, for time lost and truths unshared. Vanessa was a different story. She avoided me for weeks after the event. Michael told me she was processing. I understood. Her entire perception of me had been upended. The woman she'd dismissed as irrelevant had turned out to have achieved exactly what she herself was striving for. When we finally did meet, it was on neutral ground, a cafe downtown. She came in wearing simple jeans and a sweater, her usual perfect appearance somewhat subdued. "I owe you an apology," she said stiffly, before I could even greet her. "I've been unkind." "Yes, you have," I agreed, not making it easier for her. "Some truths need to be acknowledged plainly." She nodded, accepting this. "The thing is, Eleanor, I always felt like I had to prove myself to you. That I wasn't good enough for Michael, for your perfect family. I was genuinely surprised. I never thought that. Maybe not. But that's how it felt. So I pushed you away first." She twisted her wedding ring nervously. "Finding out who you really are, what you accomplished, it made me realize how ridiculous I've been. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was honest. We talked for over an hour that day. Not as friends, exactly, but as 2 women seeing each other clearly for the first time. Things didn't magically become perfect after that. Vanessa still has her moments of thoughtlessness, and I still sometimes feel the sting of being sidelined. But there's a new respect between us. She's even asked for my advice on her influencer work. particularly when it involves fashion history. As for my LEB legacy, I decided to use the settlement money to start a small scholarship fund for young designers who need to balance career and family. My name is back in the fashion world, but on my own terms this time. Last month, for my 73rd birthday, Michael and Vanessa hosted a dinner party. When I arrived, I noticed something unexpected. Vanessa had framed one of my original sketches and hung it prominently in their living room. It's the most beautiful a thing we own, she said simply, when she saw me looking at it. Later that evening, as we all sat around their dining table, Michael raised his glass. To Mom, who taught me that it's never too late to be recognized for who you truly are. I looked around at the faces of my family, my son who was learning to see me anew, my daughter-in-law who was trying in her imperfect way to make amends, and I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We can't change the past. I don't regret the years I spent being just a mother. They were the richest years of my life. But there's something powerful about reclaiming the fullness of who you are, about refusing to be reduced to a single role or definition. Sometimes I wonder what Robert would think of all this. I like to believe he's somewhere smiling, not at all surprised that the woman he loved has finally stepped back into her full self. After all, he always said I looked my best in blue florals.